Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's success story, where we're going to be speaking with Cynthia, who recently matched in the 2021 match. So, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I'm excited to dive into your story and your journey. So, can you start by letting us know a little bit about your background and medical education and kind of where you've come from along this path so far?
Sure. I did my medical school in England at Warwick Medical University. It's a graduate program, so kind of similar to how a lot of the US students did their med school. And I worked as a doctor in England for a year. So I did an intern year and then moved over to the US and applied for my whole match process.
And what was it that wanted you to pursue residency in the US?
So my family, I have family here, and that's the biggest reason I wanted to be in the US.
Okay, and what specialty did you apply for or specialties?
So I applied for anesthesiology. I also applied to a couple of internal medicine programs. I know that anesthesiology is very competitive, and I was quite afraid that I may not have match. So I applied to a couple of internal medicine programs, hoping that if I didn't match into anesthesiology, I could pursue a pathway of pulmonary and critical care down the line. But very thankfully, I matched into anesthesia, so that's very
Wonderful.
exciting.
Yeah, congratulations. Which program did you get into?
So I'm going to go to Rutgers, NJMS. So that's in Newark, and it covers 4 hospitals. So it covers Barnabas, Englewood, Newark Beth Israel, and University Hospital.
Great. And how did that fall on your rank list?
That was actually number 1 on my rank list.
Wow,
I
amazing.
really wanted to be there because I've spoken to quite a few of the previous residents. Um, and it just sounded like a really, really great training program. It's tough because it's based in an inner city, but I think that's where you get really good, hands-on training.
And what about it was so enticing to you besides the exposure? Was there anything else about the program that you felt particularly called towards?
So from what we were told and what the stats showed, a lot of the residents match really well into fellowship as well. So that was part of it. And also UH covers a lot of the big traumas in New Jersey. So I wanted to be able to kind of also be exposed to that kind of training, because as an anesthesiologist, I feel like if you can get hands-on, and if you can, if you can put an area in a very difficult trauma case, you'd be able to do it in most things. So that was the two, like those were the two biggest things that kind of enticed me to the program. And also I wanted to stay in the Northeast as well. So I applied mainly only to the Northeast.
And what was it about anesthesia in particular that drew you to that field in general?
This is like rewriting my personal statement. I start
Yeah.
talking about it in person. So throughout medical school, I have always found anesthesiologists to be the greatest teachers. I mean,
Okay.
all doctors were great at teaching, but there was something about anesthesiologists. They were always willing to teach me. I'd be in a long 8-hour surgery, and they'd take me on for 5 hours and teach me all kinds of stuff. I think there's a really good balance of both medicine and procedural stuff. So, if I think I like to do a bit of both, and that gives me that. And my undergraduate degree, I did a lot of pharmacology and physiology. So that also kind of pushed me down this path, because I just like the idea of being able to integrate what I've done in my undergraduate degree. And yeah, just all my clinical experience in med school kind of just pointed me down that pathway. And when I worked as an intern in England, I worked very closely with a lot of critical care team. And I think it was just really rewarding to see how they could help patients in so many ways. And it was always very exciting. There was always a lot going on. But at the end of the day, it was just rewarding. So that's why I wanted to do anesthesia.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were coming in as an extremely competitive applicant, or how did you feel that you fell in terms of the spectrum of applicants for that specialty?
I'm definitely not a very competitive applicant, which is why I was very worried. And I was sure that I had to reapply next year.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that I didn't.
Thank
So
goodness you got it. Yeah.
my step one wasn't a competitive score. I think
Okay.
that's my biggest red flag. And I actually addressed that in my personal statement.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So my step one score was the average of what you'd expect anesthesiology US MDs to have. So obviously as an IMG, they required a higher score. But I really tried and picked it up on my step two, which I think helped. And I also had US clinical experience in anesthesia, and having, LORs from them and making connections, I think helped a lot as well. So I
Was
would,
your,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
So I wouldn't say I was like very competitive as an IMG, but I think it helped just having all that experience.
Was your US clinical experience at the program you matched with?
No, it wasn't. So I did it in a New York City hospital. They offered international students to do electives there, so I did it there, and I just managed to get into an anesthesia elective over there.
Wow. So was that some independent program, or how did that work exactly to get the rotation?
So it's actually with Cornell. I applied online. So they have a global health department where they have a list of, elective programs you can apply to as an international student. And you rank, kind of like making a rank list. You rank the programs you want to do. You write like a little personal statement of why you want to go there. And then you pay like a tuition fee. So yeah, I applied for that in my third year of medical school, and then you find out like 5-6 months later, and I managed to go in my fourth year.
Perfect. Yeah. So you're saying that having that US experience plus the US letters of recommendation in the specialty really
Mm-hmm.
helped strengthen your application
Yeah,
for anesthesiology.
yes, that's for sure.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you addressed your step score in the personal statement? I think that's a really interesting facet that you didn't fail the attempt. You just didn't get like an amazing score.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you talk about that in the personal statement?
So that was something that I kind of really, really pondered on. I was like, should I include it? Should I not? Should I wait until they ask me in my interviews?
Hmm.
And I just decided that, owning it was better, because I can just tell them that this is what happened. And then when they ask me in the interviews, I'll explain in more detail. So in my personal statement, I spoke about why I want to do anesthesia at the beginning. And then I went on to, I guess, a paragraph of this: I wanted to do anesthesia, but I understand that my step score may not have fitted the requirements. So I addressed that, explained why my step score wasn't as great as it should be. So I set step one together with sitting with my UK exam. So I was studying for 2 exams parallel to each other, on top of 12-hour clinical days. So that was like a bad choice on my part.
Right.
Um, so I addressed all of that, and I think that kind of shows them that you're a determined student, and yeah, it just shows them that you still pass, even though it wasn't a great score, and that you were still able to do everything that I had to do and pass, and still manage to and improved in my step two. So that showed, I guess, it showed a lot of resiliency and determination. So I think that's helpful.
Definitely. And when you applied, was your step 2 CK score part of your application, or did that come in a little bit later in the season, or how did that work for you?
So I applied with it as a part of my application. I set 2CK January last year. So I set it 8 months before application opened.
Hmm. Do you feel like that helped play a role in getting more interviews, showing that, okay, I already proven that I have improved on the step 2 CK compared to my step 1?
Um, I honestly don't know. I think I still think that step one was probably the biggest filter in terms of interviews. Um, but I think maybe seeing my step two score and the huge improvement on that score was like, okay, the student is able to do like these standardized exams. Something must have happened with step one. So it may have helped, but I honestly am not too sure.
Did your scores ever come up in the interviews, or did they talk about what you mentioned in your personal statement during the interview?
So one of my interviewers actually asked me, "What's your biggest red flag of your application, or what's your biggest concern?" So I addressed my step score, and another interviewer, program director, said, I know that in your personal statement, you said, your step scores are a concern for you, but I want you to know that step scores don't mean that much as long as you can be a hardworking resident and do what we need you to do. So that was kind of nice to know that they read it and they've acknowledged that, I didn't do great, but was still willing to give me an interview.
How did you respond to them when they said that to you?
So with the first interviewer who asked what my biggest red flag was, I explained that, I thought my step score was my biggest red flag. And I tried to improve from that. And I think he liked that, I did improve from that, and that was very helpful. And with the other interviewer that asked, so he asked the question by starting it with, what did he ask? Oh, why do you want to come to this program? And would you be, I can't remember the details, but I think something along the lines of, what kind of resident would you be? So I think he was trying to get to being like, a hardworking resident, someone that can work with a great team. So I was like, I explained, why I thought I'd be a good resident in that program. And he said, and that's when he said, I know that you were concerned about your step score, but if you can be a good resident, I can train you to do your future exams fine. I just want to know that you will be hardworking and that you can fit in the program.
Definitely. And did any questions take you off guard or that you weren't expecting during the interview process?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So with one of the program directors I met, the first thing he asked me was, what are your questions for me? I was sitting there ready for him to ask me questions. So I stumbled. I just didn't know what to say.
Role reversal there, kind of.
Yeah, that was, I kind of just like started mumbling a little, and I was like, okay, get myself back together, Cynthia. And another one that really caught me off guard was, we were talking about one of the hospitals that I had applied to, which was kind of like a public safety net hospital, which dealt with a very underserved population. So we kind of went down like a bit of a hole, talking about universal healthcare, which is,
Wow.
what I did in the UK, and I worked in the universal healthcare system. So that really kind of threw me off guard as well, because, like most healthcare here is private. And
Right.
yeah, that was a big, I was so sure that I screwed that interview up because of that question.
Do you feel like you guys were debating something or actually just kind of discussing the issue a little bit? Or how did that, why do you feel like it was a distraction or a detriment?
So yeah, it was a bit of a debate of an issue.
Okay.
So he was telling me about how you can look at some of the subspecialty doctors in the hospital he works with, and they're earning crazy amount of money. And if you go ask them, they would not approve a universal healthcare system. So why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do this when everyone else in the healthcare system and everyone else you work with would not agree with it? So that was a big throw off. And I kind of just tried to stay my ground and explain why it worked in the UK for, the NHS. And I think at the end, it kind of impressed him that I didn't sway my answer towards what he was trying to push me towards. And I just stood my ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good
scary.
Yeah. So do you feel like there's something in particular you're hoping to bring to anesthesiology or to medicine in general as you start your training as a resident and your future career?
So my biggest thing is kind of around IMGs. I think personally, I know a lot of people who wanted to come to the US, but there's just so many struggles and hurdles to get here. And the US, it shows that they do need IMG doctors, and they do need doctors. So I'm hoping I could raise more awareness for IMGs, especially UK IMGs, because that's not a very common route, because most people in the UK are happy staying in the UK, or they would go to Australia and New Zealand. So I'm hoping that, going to residency, I'll be able to do that and create awareness and, kind of guide UK grads who want to come here to do so. And also just enjoying residency and getting through it, because I know it's going to be a tough slog and a tough 4 years.
Yeah,
and I guess whatever comes after, comes after.
definitely. Now, do you have a top piece of advice that you would tell future IMGs or residency candidates?
Yes, 100%. You're not your step score. I think that's the biggest lesson for me. And there are so many ways to build your application. So if you did poorly but still pass, there are ways that you can build your application.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've just proven that with, your success in anesthesiology. And I think you were able to piece together your application in a way that still made you a convincing and very competitive, relatively applicant for that field. So
Yeah.
that's really amazing. And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us and to provide your insight. I love that bit about you're not your step score. I think that's really powerful and personal. So is there any way that people can, keep in contact with you and your story on social media or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram, so they can connect or ask me any questions on Instagram. And if they have more questions and want to email me, I'm happy to give that out if they send me a message on Instagram.
Great. Yeah, and we'll include the details for that in the description below. So thank you everybody for watching this, and thank you, Cynthia, for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.